There's a concept in screenwriting about, well, you'll sometimes hear this phrase, writing on spec. Writing on spec. What is writing on spec? Well, this is a term that gets bandied about in two ways. But the core way that it gets bandied about is you writing on spec versus writing for hire. Writing for hire is, of course, very simple and easy to define. Somebody has paid you, hires you to write something. If I, Stranger Fiction, Jonathan Ball at Stranger Fiction hires you to write a movie for Stranger Fiction, well, if I hire you to write it, you're going to write Mrs. Claus. When you're done, I own Mrs. Claus. As a work for hire, your name might be on it, but it's mine. And I control it. I make the money off it, and so on and so forth. Now, in a real scenario where you're in the union and all these things, you might have some points on it or whatever else, but put all this complexity aside. Broadly speaking, you've got work for hire, things that, a company has hired you to write for them. You don't own that stuff. And this is typically how screenwriting works at, major industry levels. Screenwriting is one of the weird jobs that you can get as a writer, which is kind of like a normal everyday office job, like a screenwriter, technically speaking, in many professional instances, is an employee. If you're working for a television show, you're just, on staff, you get a salary, you may get other things, you may get some, royalties in particular forms. You may get chunks of money when the episode airs, right? If it goes in reruns, you may get extra money and so on. So you may have like money that comes in a way that is not normal for the kind of guy who'd get like $20 an hour. He's just getting $20 an hour and he's not necessarily getting, more money, random intervals. But in other respects, it's a job. You have an employer, you go to the office, you get paid a wage, you have health insurance, and so on and so forth. Now, movie scripts work that way too. If you get hired by Paramount to write, Aliens 27, well, you're an employee of Paramount. They're paying your fee, but you're a part of a union now. You got to pay union dues. You got all sorts of health insurance ability through the union and things like this. Like, it's very, compared to other types of writing, like writing novels, writing poetry, and so on, screenwriting is very much a officey job that's been professionalized, and so there's good and bad that comes out of that. But one side of it is this for hire, where you're writing something, somebody's paid you to write it, you don't own it, they own it. You might have certain rights in there, but fundamentally, they own it. There's another type of screenwriting called writing on spec. Writing on spec is the opposite of writing for hire. Nobody's paying you to do it. You're writing on spec, on the speculation that at some point you might be able to sell it. So if I just come up with an idea, if I'm writing for hire, often that's a situation where somebody has told me what to write. They've said, John, I need you to write a, I was working for a true crime TV show for a little bit. It's like, oh, write this, here's a crime this guy committed, you go research that and write about it. So, I didn't even know this thing. I didn't even know who this guy was. Now I got to go write a script about him. That's work for hire. It's not my idea. Somebody else came with that idea. And that could happen in a level. I, as Jonathan Ball, as Stranger Fiction, my company is called Stranger Fiction. I could hire you to write, I want to write a movie about a balloon animal that comes to life. Go write that movie for me, and I could give you, some level of detailed instruction or no level of instruction. That could be all I say to you. Probably not, but point is, often in the work for hire scenario, the idea, what precisely you're doing, the parameters of that job have been generated by the person who's paying you. Spec, you're typically generating things yourself, so you're coming up with your own idea that nobody's paying you to do. You don't even know if anyone has any interest in it, but you think you're speculating. No, it's worth spending time on this. Not only artistically, because I want to, and it fills my creative bucket, but I'm speculating that somebody, if I were to finish this script of this movie, somebody might buy it from me. I might be able to sell it to Paramount. They haven't paid me to do it, but maybe they'll pay me after I do it. So that's writing on spec. Now, there's another term you'll sometimes hear, which is spec script. There are two types of spec script. A spec script is just any script you've written on speculation, that rather than for hire. So you own a spec script, you came up with it, you wrote it. But you'll hear that term bandied about in two different ways. One is to refer to an original idea that I wrote a movie script for. Another is to refer to a original idea I wrote a script for, but for an existing series I don't have the rights for and I didn't make up. So if you want to get a job in television, one of the things you might do is find an existing show that already is on the air or was on the air. Maybe you like the show Dexter. Well, you might come up with your own idea for a Dexter episode and write that episode. So in that scenario, what you've written is a spec script. Nobody paid you to write that Dexter episode. You just came up with the idea and you wrote it yourself. However, so it's a spec script because you're speculating. You're writing it on spec. But at the same time, in that example, you can't do anything with that script. You can't sell it to anyone because you don't own Dexter. You can't even sell it to the Dexter people, honestly, because they don't want it. But what you can do with that script, with the spec script, like this Dexter episode that it's never going to get made, that you just came up with the idea for yourself, what you can do with that spec script is use it like a resume to get a job at, say, some other show like Dexter. So there is some other serial killer procedural or something, and you want to write for them. You use this Dexter script as your sample. So that's one type of spec writing. That's very common in television. The other type of spec writing is more common in feature films, although it's becoming very common in television, which is to write your own movie script for your own idea rather than an existing property. So both are spec scripts. Broadly speaking, it's better to, it depends what you want to do, but all other things being equal, it's better to write your own idea on spec rather than writing for hire. Why might I say that? Well, even though, of course, somebody paying you money is maybe a situation you enjoy the sounds of, ultimately what makes more sense for you in the long run, professionally and often financially, is to work on your own projects, because that spec script you write, you own. Once you finished your script, if this is the great power of writing and being a writer. If I come up with an idea for a movie, nobody's paying me to write it, but I can write it myself on spec. Once I'm done my spec script, once it exists, not only am I the writer of that spec script, I'm now a producer because I have the rights to a script. And the rights to a script are a powerful thing. Now, the script has to be good. The script has to be something that somebody wants, theoretically at least, to spend money on, to buy. There's some value in. Even if that script never attracts any money or never gets made, it has credible value as a resume piece, to maybe get you some for hire work. or get you an agent, get you whatever. But having control of that script, being a writer producer, gives you a lot of power. Now, it's not real power necessarily in the sense that you can't necessarily do a lot with it. Like, you need millions of dollars to do anything with that script. So there's like a missing, element there. I'm guessing you don't have a few $1 million lying around. And even if you did, investing in your script is a highly ill-advised venture. But nevertheless, there's a lot of power and value in having some spec material. And what you should always be doing as a writer is, on a regular basis, working on spec. You should always be writing a spec script. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you write a spec script. Saturday, you finish it. Sunday, you start a new spec script. Now, you can't do it in a week, but just to illustrate the idea, always be working on a spec script. Unless you're being paid to write something for hire, you should be working on a spec script. And even if you're being paid to write something for hire, you should probably also, on the side, be hustling out a spec script. That's how you become a professional writer. One, through the practice of it, but two, through having assets. There's a saying in business, when in doubt, build assets. And when you are a writer, what the assets you build are your stories, but having cool ideas for stories is totally worthless. Having a script, though, that's another thing.